Hi, my name is Todd Uglow, and I'm a Career Resources Specialist here at Missouri State University. Today, we are going to be discussing how you can learn to master your interview. First, we are going to review how to effectively prepare for your interview. When preparing for your interview, there are several aspects that you should take into consideration. Those include conducting a self-assessment, conducting adequate research, considering what you should bring to the interview, mapping your route, preparing questions for the employer, and of course practicing. It's important to allot yourself enough time to adequately prepare for an upcoming interview. Whatever you do, please do not wait until the night before. Conducting a self-assessment is a vital practice when preparing for your interview. This process will allow you to have a better understanding of your background and experiences and how they have prepared you for the position you are interviewing for. Often when I work with students who are undergoing this process, I highly recommend that they even take the time to write their thoughts down. This is especially helpful if you are a visual learner. Brainstorming your past work and educational experiences should entail a reflection of your accomplishments, your contributions, and what you have learned from these experiences. Essentially, your goal is to demonstrate how these experiences have prepared you for the job you are interviewing for. Although the employer may have learned about some of these things through your application or resume, the interview is your opportunity to elaborate on these experiences. Remember that experience doesn't only come from a paid job. You should also consider volunteer activities, student organizations, or other notable experiences that you've had. Making sense of your skills and strengths means having a strong understanding of your strengths and how those strengths could contribute to the company or organization you are interviewing with. Oftentimes, an employer may even ask you about your skills or strengths during an interview. You should be prepared to not only list your strengths and skills, but also to be able to discuss how you've used these and why they would be beneficial to the company or the organization. This is also true of your weaknesses. It's important to know where some of your areas of improvement are and be able to discuss these if asked about them in an interview. Be sure to give this some considerable thought though. Employers know that everyone has areas for growth. You should be sure to focus on the fact that you are aware of these and discuss how you are working on them to improve yourself. Finally, you should be able to draw connections between yourself and the mission and values of both the position and the organization. Or in other words, why do you feel this organization is the right place for you? Conducting a fair amount of research is also critical in effectively preparing you for your interview. You typically wouldn't go into a test without studying, right? Well, you wouldn't if you want to do well on it. Research is more than just poking around on a company website. When conducting your research, you should also look into average salaries for similar positions, the functions or duties of jobs similar to the one you are interviewing for, as well as some additional pieces of information that may help you in having a better understanding of that role. This will help you to have a better understanding of the position and what might be expected of you. Furthermore, employers often like to discuss compensation at some point during the hiring process, so having knowledge about that type of pay and benefits that are common can help to better prepare you for those conversations. Researching the industry you may be potentially working in is also beneficial. In many interviews, employers may ask questions to gauge your understanding of the trends, competitors, as well as challenges that industry may currently be facing. The more knowledgeable you are about these factors, the better prepared you will be to field these types of questions during your interview. Finally, you should do extensive research on the employer you're interviewing with. There are several resources to assist you with this, including company websites, review sites such as Glassdoor.com, professional journals and magazines for the industry, as well as LinkedIn. The Career Center homepage also has numerous resources to assist you with this research in the career preparation section of our website. Planning out what you should bring to an interview can often help to alleviate some stress. You should plan to bring several copies of your application documents, which would include your resume, cover letter, and a list of references. Having these available can help you to look good to an employer in case you find yourself in a situation where the employer may have forgotten to print your documents. You should also bring 2 forms of identification. This is especially important for full-time interviews. Sometimes employers may want you to fill out additional paperwork before or after your interview, or they may need verification of your identity for access to certain locations in a building. Consider bringing at least 2 pens with you. Many people ask me, why 2 pens? We've all been in a situation where we were writing something down and our pen ran out of ink. Having extra pens will again make you look more prepared and also alleviate some of the stress that might come if you happen to be writing something down during the interview at the time your pen gives out. You should bring a professional pad folio or folder to store your documents or any handouts, pamphlets, etc. provided by the employer. Also, having your questions for the employer written down or typed up can be very beneficial. Having them ready to go takes off a little bit of the pressure of you needing to remember them at the end of the interview. It's important to note that you should always have a few questions prepared for the employer. We'll be discussing this a little bit further on a later slide. You may also want to consider bringing directions or any email correspondence that you've received from the employer. Although it seems a little bit old school, I do recommend that you print these items off. You may find yourself in a situation where either your cell phone service is not adequate or that you're having trouble finding the email that the employer sent you. Additionally, consider bringing some mints. I typically do not recommend gum, but mints are definitely something that you may consider, as well as a small bottle of water. We've all experienced traffic delays, and they typically seem to only happen whenever we are in a hurry to get somewhere. One piece of advice I would offer to help reduce some of the anxiety that may occur if this does happen to you on the day of your interview is mapping your route. As part of your preparation, you should consider traveling the route a day or two before your interview, and if possible, doing this around the same time you anticipate traveling on the day of your interview. Doing this will allow you to time your trip and locate the appropriate parking lots and entrances to the building. If you are traveling out of town and will not have enough time to do this for your interview, then I would recommend using a service such as Google Maps to help you better prepare and map your route. Now that we've discussed some strategies for preparing for your interview, let's discuss interview attire etiquette. Your appearance does not only relate to the clothing you are wearing during an interview, it's also important to consider several other factors. Keep yourself well groomed. This includes breath, facial hair, makeup, and nails. You should also consider emitting perfumes or colognes. The reason for this is because strong smells can sometimes be a distraction, especially if the interviewer is someone who is sensitive to this. When it comes to your appearance, remember that while it's good to stand out, you don't want your appearance to distract the employer from what you are saying. When deciding what to wear for your interview, take into account what's appropriate for the position, company, and industry. Attire can look very different across various professions, so that's where some of your research may come into play. When in doubt, you will typically be better off erring on the side of overdressing as opposed to being too casual. In many circumstances, especially for internships or full-time employment, a business suit would be appropriate. However, as I've previously stated, that may not be necessary for all jobs, companies, or industries. A few other aspects to consider are having minimal accessories, ensuring your clothing is ironed or neatly pressed, avoiding any distracting patterns or colors, and ensuring your attire matches from head to toe. If you are ever unsure of what attire would be appropriate for an interview, the Career Center is always happy to provide feedback. You can stop by one of our office locations or even email a picture to us. Next, we are going to review tips for what to do right before, during, and after your interview. When on location, always remember that the interview starts the minute you arrive on site. Be sure to carry yourself appropriately and keep in mind that many employers begin evaluating you at this point. On the day of your interview, you should arrive early, but not too early. I recommend arriving between 15 to 20 minutes prior to the start of your interview. When on site, remember that you never know who has a say in the hiring process. Sometimes, employers will even ask the front office staff how your demeanor was when you checked in for your interview. Be sure to treat everyone you interact with as if they are the one who is making the hiring decision. Extend the same courtesy and positive demeanor as you would expect in return. Avoid bringing too many items with you to the interview. You should attempt to only have the things that are necessary. Bringing a small handbag, briefcase, etc. is okay, just be sure it isn't too bulky. I also recommend visiting the restroom before heading in. This will give you an opportunity to check your appearance and take care of any other personal needs you might have. Remember that interviews can sometimes be long. Attempt to collect any free pamphlets, brochures, etc. while waiting for your interview. This can help you learn a little bit more about the company or organization and also demonstrate your genuine interest in the position. Finally, leave your phone in the car or put away. Often, when we find ourselves in awkward situations, we have a tendency to pull out our phones and begin scrolling. You should avoid doing this if at all possible. If you do bring your phone in with you, be sure it's on silent and not vibrate. When in the interview, there are a few dynamics you should take into consideration. First is the handshake. It's important to know how to do this properly. Your hand should meet theirs at the web, and your grip should be firm, but not so firm that you are engaging in what we like to call the bone crusher. If you've not had a lot of experience performing a proper handshake, then practicing a bit before your interview would be great. A firm handshake can often demonstrate enthusiasm and confidence. You should also keep your focus on the interviewer for the entirety of the interview. Try to avoid looking away too often. Just like with a good handshake, doing this can further demonstrate your enthusiasm and confidence. Be okay with silence. I often tell students that when you are in the hot seat, 30 seconds can feel like an eternity. Don't try to fill the conversation void if it's not necessary. When answering your questions, you should attempt to provide the employer with as much detail without dragging your answers out too much. On average, your interview response should be between 2 to 3 minutes. Although some questions may not need that much time to convey, it's important to ensure that you are getting all of the information across that you think is necessary. We'll discuss that more in an upcoming slide. Engage in active listening. One mistake that many people make when interviewing is that they try to respond to a question before letting the interviewer finish. It's important to avoid doing this at all costs, as you may miss a critical piece of the question. Listen intently to what the interviewer is asking, take a second to collect your thoughts, and then respond. During the interview is not the time to be shy. Be enthusiastic about your experience and your interest in the position. Enthusiasm and confidence can go a long way even if some of the content of your responses falls a bit short. A good way to tell how the employer is perceiving your communication style is through their body language. Typically, if an employer is nodding their head, providing words of affirmation, or is writing down what you are saying, it means that they are actively engaged. If they appear to be disinterested, have stopped writing down what you are saying, or are not giving much verbal feedback, that could be an indicator that it may be time to wrap up your response to a question. It's also important to jot down anything notable the employer says. It is definitely okay to take a few notes during the interview. In fact, I highly recommend it. This could help you develop a question to ask the employer later, and it also shows your genuine interest. Again, don't overdo it though. There are several types of interviews that you may come across in your professional career. The most common are traditional face-to-face interviews, but two other commonly used types of interviews are phone and virtual. When conducting a phone or virtual interview, there are a few aspects you will want to address. First, if you are interviewing virtually, what does the room behind you look like? Avoid having anything in your background that is going to distract the employer from what you are saying. Second, you should be aware of any noise distractions that may arise. If you have a dog that likes to bark or a roommate who likes to listen to football with surround sound on, then you may want to consider another location for your interview. The Career Center is happy to assist with securing a quiet location on campus should you need it. You should also be sure to check things like your internet connection or cell phone reception, turning off notifications on your computer that may go off during the interview, and whether or not your computer has the up-to-date software installed, especially if you are conducting a virtual interview. These things should all be done well before the start of your interview. Another interview type you may encounter is a panel or committee interview. These are very similar to a traditional one-on-one interview, except you will be interviewing with multiple individuals. Many of the same concepts still apply, however, there are a few additional practices you may want to engage in. First, attempt to shake everyone's hand if possible. Don't just focus on the person who greeted you first. When answering a question, you should address everyone in the room, no matter who asked the question. Use the sprinkler effect that you may have learned about in your public speaking class. By doing this, you are more likely to engage everyone in the room. In some circumstances, an employer may ask you to accompany them to dinner or lunch. There are a few key things to consider if this happens. Avoid ordering the most expensive thing on the menu. A good way to determine what is appropriate is by asking the employer what they recommend. Avoid ordering something that is too messy. This is definitely not the time for you to order the rack of ribs. If you are of age and choose to consume alcohol during the dinner or lunch, do so very sparingly. Although others at the table may be drinking, remember that you are still in the interview process and need to maintain a coherent and professional demeanor. If you are offered alcohol, but do not drink or are not interested in partaking, it is more than okay to communicate this to the person offering. Finally, remember proper dining etiquette. Each year, the Career Center puts on an etiquette dinner to assist students in learning these techniques. However, if you are unable to participate, there are a plethora of resources online to help you learn more. It's important to know whether or not an interview is a screening interview or a selection interview. Usually, a screening interview takes place when an employer is attempting to narrow down the pool of applicants. A selection interview is what occurs with the finalists for the position. Often, the employer will communicate this to you. However, if you are ever unsure, it is definitely okay to ask the interviewer. However, you should be doing this prior to your interview date. Although it's almost impossible to know exactly what questions you'll get during an interview, there are some common questions that you may want to become familiar with. A common question many employers choose to ask focus on helping them to better understand your strengths and weaknesses. As I discussed earlier in this presentation, having a strong understanding of your strengths and weaknesses is vital. If you can't communicate what you are able to bring to the table, then how is an employer going to know what they're going to get from you if you're hired for this position? When preparing for your interview, jot down your strengths and then add examples of when you've used these strengths and how they may relate to the position you will be interviewing for. Another question type you may receive are futuristic in nature. These usually come in the form of asking you what your long or short-term goals are. It's important to have somewhat of an idea of where you see yourself in the next few years, and more importantly, how will this job help you achieve some of your educational or professional goals. You may also be asked why you are interested in the position and company, or you may be asked what you know about the field or industry. This is where you can really show off the research you have conducted in preparation for the interview. One of the most commonly used questions is, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? It's important to note that this is usually one of the very first questions asked. Your response to this question should be around 2 minutes and should include a bit of information about your professional experience and/or educational background, why you chose the major that you did, why you chose the career that you did, some of your professional interests, as well as any other notable facts about yourself. It's okay to include some personal information. However, it's important that you do not get too personal and remain professional. Consider focusing on some of your interests and hobbies instead. Look at your response to this question as an opportunity to set the tone for the rest of the interview. Consider what you would want someone to know about you in under 2 minutes. An employer may also ask why they should hire you over other candidates. It's important to be confident, but not too boastful. Remember, you don't really know the other candidates. Focus on reiterating your skills and adding anything that you may have forgotten to add earlier in the interview. This will often be the last question they ask, so it's a really good way to finish out strong. Another commonly used interview question are behavioral-based questions. These types of questions are often posed with a prompt that goes something like, tell me about a time when, ... or share with me an experience you had with ... These types of questions have become increasingly popular with employers because they help an interviewer gain a better sense of how you would respond or react in a variety of situations, which can give them an indication of how you may engage in the work if they hire you. The key to answering a behavioral-based question is having your stories prepared. I recommend when preparing for an interview, you jot down specific situations you have been involved in that required you to engage in several key transferable skills. These skills typically include things like problem solving, communication, working in teams, using technology, working under pressure, and dealing with conflict. When writing down your examples, consider how some of these skills were present. As you can see here, there's an effective formula that has a variety of steps that can assist you in mastering a behavioral-based question. The STAR method has been widely cited as the best way to tell a story in a succinct manner while also giving the appropriate amount of information to an employer. The S stands for situation. This is where your story starts. Give the employer a brief background that sets the stage. Describe the context within which you performed a job or faced a challenge at work or within an organization. For example, perhaps you were working on a group project or you had a conflict with a coworker. This situation can be drawn from a work experience, volunteer position, or any other relevant event. Be sure to be as specific as possible. The T stands for task. This is where you would describe your responsibility in that situation. Perhaps you had to help your group complete a project within a tight deadline, resolve a conflict with a coworker, or hit a sales target. The A stands for action. Here's where you would describe how you completed the task or endeavor, or how you rose to the challenge and met the challenge. The R stands for results. This is where you will wrap up your response by explaining the outcomes or results generated by the action taken. It may be helpful to emphasize what you accomplished or what you learned. Using this method effectively will ensure that you have covered all of your bases and have provided the appropriate amount of context to the employer to address the question they asked. As I have previously stated, practice is a key element to ensuring a successful interview. As with anything, it takes practice for most people to do well. When practicing for an interview, I often encourage students to equate it to studying for a test. Think about the practices you engage in to successfully prepare yourself for an exam. Some people do really well with note cards, while others do well by writing out everything they want to say. There is no right or wrong way. The key is that you find what works best for you. There are a few universal recommendations, however, that I would make. First, practice questions both well ahead of your interview as well as closer to the actual date and time of your interview. Second, consider recording yourself. Although it may seem awkward, recording yourself can help in two ways. It can give you some guidance on whether your questions are too short or too long, or your responses are too short or too long. It can also help you to have a better sense of your speech pace and volume. Third, ask someone to practice with you. Consider asking someone who is actually going to give you honest feedback, though. Their Career Center also provides mock interviews to students and alumni. The Career Center also has a helpful program called Interview Stream, where you can set your own questions and record yourself conducting a mock interview. Fourth, when practicing every question, think about how well you are connecting yourself to the employer and the position. Finally, avoid trying to memorize responses. Doing this can sometimes put too much pressure on you to get it exactly right during the interview. I would instead recommend creating bullet points or key terms that you want to be sure to address during your interview and practicing from those notes. A key aspect to having a successful interview is being prepared to ask the employer questions. If you do not have any questions, an employer may take that as you are not interested in the position or that you think you know everything there is to know about the position in the company. I recommend having at least 3 to 4 questions prepared for the employer for every interview. Below are a few questions that you may consider asking. If you find yourself in a situation where the employer answered all of your questions during the interview and you just can't think of any more, it is more than okay to let the employer know that you had questions prepared, but that they did such a great job explaining everything that you don't have any at the moment, but that you'll also follow up with them at a later date if you do have any questions. In addition to questions you should ask, there are also some you should avoid. It is typically not professional or appropriate to ask questions about pay or benefits, especially in the first interview. The only time this is appropriate is if the employer brings it up first. You should also avoid asking any questions that could have been easily found online, about rumors you've heard about the company or position, or questions related to other aspects that may raise a red flag about your work ethic. After the interview is over, remember to shake the interviewer's hand and leave with the same confidence and poise you had when you arrived. Within 24 hours of your interview, it's crucial that you send a follow-up email or card. Although sending them a handwritten note as a nice touch, it may not always be possible. Sending an email is a great alternative. Many employers report that most candidates don't do this anymore, and when they do get a thank you card or email, it will often increase their consideration of a candidate. Your thank you should reiterate your interest in the position, obviously thank them for their time, and it may also include any key things you may have forgotten to say during the interview. It should also be short, no more than 3 to 5 sentences. Additionally, if you have not heard back from an employer and it has passed the time when they said they would get back with you, it is okay to follow up with them to discuss if you are still being considered for the position. When doing this, it's important to avoid being too overbearing and that you'll only typically need to follow up once. A few additional interview mistakes to avoid would include practicing your speech patterns. This is where recording yourself can really come in handy. Be careful about coming off as too casual or comfortable during an interview. Remember, you want to remain both professional and personable. It's important to develop strategies to help you mitigate nervous tendencies. If you are someone who fidgets a lot when you are nervous, work on techniques to help you reduce that practice prior to the interview. It's also important to be aware of your body language. This means you should avoid crossing your arms or slouching during the interview. Finally, you should know your career documents. This means knowing your resume and cover letter from front to back. Employers may often ask a question that is directed towards something you've listed on your resume. Remember that if it's listed, be prepared to talk about it. I hope you enjoyed this presentation on the foundational skills to mastering your interview. Although there may have been some aspects of interviewing that we were not able to cover today, I do want to reiterate that the Career Center is here to serve you. We offer a variety of services, including mock interviews, to help get you career ready. If you are someone who is unsure about your career path or would like assistance with exploring careers or majors, our office offers a variety of services to assist you with that endeavor as well. To make an appointment, you can stop by, call, email, or log into your Handshake account. We look forward to assisting you in the future.